he's going to introduce his board and recognize his members. With please. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to Rotary for hosting the meeting this year. I'm Kyle McLean. I'm president of Kiwanis, downtown Kiwanis. We are a global organization of volunteers dedicated to changing the world one child and one community at a time. Kiwanis was founded in Detroit in 1915 and now has over 600,000 members worldwide. Some of our community service projects include treating the Baptist Children's Home Kids to a day at Whitewater, along with a cookout at Boys Ranch. We also do a Christmas party for the special kids from Oklahoma City Public Schools, held each year at Andrew Johnson Elementary School. And we have an ongoing reading and mentoring program for the pre-K kids at Carver Mark Twain Head Start School. Other things we do in the community are listed in the program. I'd like to introduce our officers and directors. Please stand and remain standing as I call you. Our president-elect is John Pennington. Our past president is Beverly Woodrow. Vice President Carol Sorensen. Treasurer Aaron Beatty. Secretary Terry Van Landingham. And our directors, Randy Stoner, Steve Slauson, Creightley Epperson, Sonny Kearley, Philip Busey Jr., Mike Bidinger, and John Covington. And now would all Kiwanis please stand. Thank you.
Kyle, thank you. Now, Gary Blevins, president of the Lions Club. If you would come up and do the introductions, please.
I'm very pleased to be president of the Lions Club of Oklahoma City downtown. We were founded in 1916, and as Brett said, the third club in the world, along with Chicago and Dallas. We have 1.2 million members worldwide and are the largest service club in the world. Our special project this year is the rebuilding of the Children's Memorial Park at Lake Pepin. We've raised $420,000 to complete that project, and we're extremely proud of it. Our officers are me, I'm the president, immediate past president Marvin Ainsworth, first vice president Eric Johnson, second vice president Joe Van Landingham, third vice president Scott Koppenberger, treasurer Mike Hammond, secretary Ron Split, membership director Jim Arnott, tail twister Gus Gudmundson, lion tamer Lonnie Hink, another lion tamer Tom Springer, chaplain Brett Crawley, and song leader Rick Garrett. Our directors are Don Bolivar, Michael Betts, Russell Brawley, Seth Caven, John Gray, Lee Holland, Mike Leapak, Richard Smith, and Steve Tripp. With the members of the Downtown Lions Club, please stand.
Gary Blevins, thank you very much. Once again, I am Jeff Simpson. I am the current president of Club 29, the Rotary Club of Oklahoma City, and it is indeed an honor and a privilege to lead this meeting today. I'm going to introduce our board, but we are the third largest club in just a minute. The third largest club in the Rotary world of over 33,000 clubs and over 1.2 million members. We were founded in 1910, and like I said, in this October, I think November, we're going to celebrate our 100th anniversary. Clayton Taylor at that point in time will be president, and that reminds me, now Clayton, are you here? Clayton's Well, Clayton's here. He's supposed to be bringing 2 tickets. Don't forget. I'll make sure you get them. Clayton usually doesn't run late, but I certainly don't see him at this point in time. But there's 2 tickets. It's just a little silent auction. We're just trying to raise money to send to Haiti that we will match. But anyway, I want to introduce our current board of directors. President-elect is Clayton Taylor. Clayton, if you please stand, he's not here. Secretary, Marion Payton. Our treasurer this year is Barry Gangler. Sergeant-at-Arms, Emily Stratton. Our past president, foundation chairman, we want to make sure I introduced him, Jim Loftus. Jim, stand up. Past treasurer, Robert Clements. Our board of directors includes Cindy Batt, Chris Kenny, Donna Lawrence, Cinda Ottaway, Tony Shin, and John Wilkins. And I have 3 presidential advisors, just done a wonderful job this year. Paige Dobson, Jim Sherrick, Rick Vermillion, and then with the rest of Club 29, please stand so we can recognize you. Normally, we introduce our visitors and our guests. And I guess at this point, we're going to just kind of cut that out. Would you please stand so we can recognize you? If you're a visitor or a guest, please stand. We're just trying to save time for our speaker. To introduce our speaker is Hawaiian Bill Price. Bill's an attorney with Phillips Murrah Law Firm here in Oklahoma City. He also manages his family oil and gas business. Bill is well known as a passionate and committed member of the community. He's received numerous awards in recognition of his work in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Oklahoma, and it includes the U.S. Department of Justice Special Achievement Award, and he was awarded that for his job in prosecuting as an assistant and as the U.S. Attorney the largest political corruption case in U.S. history. Over 240 county commissioners. In addition to that, he's also been awarded the J.C. Penney Golden Rule Award and was also recognized for his work in drug prevention and founding the Oklahoma Alliance Against Drugs. He serves as chairman of the Oklahoma School Choice Coalition. He has great interest in domestic and foreign policy issues as well as helping disadvantaged youth. Bill and his wife Mary have 3 grown children. Bill Price, if you would please.
Thank you, Jeff. Our speaker today is an innovative entrepreneur, a creative thinker, a man with a passion for the transformational power of education and free markets. Dr. Patrick Byrne is best known for taking over as CEO and board chairman a small bankrupt company which served flea market industry for 10 years ago with only $500,000 in sales, and turning it into a major international internet company, Overstock.com, with revenues now approaching $1 billion. But Byrne's achievements began long before Overstock. At 13, Byrne was mentored by Warren Buffett, starting when Buffett purchased the auto insurance giant Geico after Byrne's father turned around the company. As a precursor to his business plan at Overstock, Byrne as a teenager started his first business buying a lot of 500 Christmas trees wholesale at $8 and selling them retail for $28. He then went to Dartmouth where he got his BA in Philosophy and Asian Studies, won a Marshall Scholarship to Cambridge, where he earned a master's degree. He then received a certificate at Beijing Normal University and a PhD from Stanford. In his 20s, he pursued his dream of becoming a heavyweight boxer, if you can believe it, before bouts with cancer which struck him 3 times in his 30s. Byrne has continued his love of physical activity, getting a black belt in Taekwondo, so no one challenged him to a match, and bicycling across the entire country 4 times, including his ride in 2000 to raise awareness and money for cancer research. Before Overstock, Byrne managed Blackhawk Investment Company, and was chairman, president, and CEO of 2 successful manufacturing companies. Byrne has been a pioneer in international development and education. In 2001, he launched WorldStock, a store within Overstock, which has created a market for and returned 60% of the profits for 10,000 village artisans throughout the developing world. He has built 22 private schools in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, which educate more than 7,000 kids. His courageous championship of reform in our capital markets against naked short selling has been vindicated by recent events. His efforts to reform our educational system begin with his formation of an advocacy group, First Class Education, whose goal was to require schools to spend at least 65% of their budget on the classroom. He is chairman of the Friedman Foundation and now the Foundation for Educational Choice, a nonprofit founded by Milton and Rose Friedman to promote education through school choice. For all his achievements in business, international development, and education, let's give an Oklahoma Civic Club welcome to Dr. Patrick Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Price, for that overly generous introduction. A little short, I thought, but ladies and gentlemen of the Kiwanis, Lions, and Rotary Club, it really is a great honor to be invited to speak here. Undeserved honor. I mentioned to some folks I met last night that on one of those bicycle trips across country, I came through Oklahoma, from Tucumcari, New Mexico, up and then across the breadth of Oklahoma. And it was so hot, it was 104 degrees, and Bill said, really, so it was February? I'm here to talk about school choice. We'll be touching on, near the end, Oklahoma's specific situation and the current bill before the legislature. And I'll have an ask. Like, I used to sell industrial torch parts, door to door, I was all over the Midwest, but I always remember you have to end every sales pitch, you have to have the ask. You have to ask for the work. So there will be a request at the end of this. But first I'm going to talk about the state of education in the U.S. And I know you're probably thinking, another one of these speeches. And this, about we need more money, or these are the different things we would do with the curriculum. And it's not going to be that way. I'm going to have a lot of numbers for you. Since this is a business group largely, I can use numbers. The numbers are going to be very big because we are, after all, talking about government spending. But I promise you, if you follow along, the arithmetic's very simple, even though there's a lot of zeros in the numbers. Please follow along. I'm going to be hitting, this works. Oh, there we go. I'm going to be hitting 7 questions. But first I'm going to take you back to your college economics days just to review what's wrong with monopolies. What's wrong with monopolies is, you remember your old supply and demand curves from college economics. They generate a market clearing price. At that price, there's a certain amount of supply and demand balance. And given that they balance, society gets this much stuff. Well, whatever it is we're talking about, they get that much quantity times that price. That's how much stuff society gets in a market. Okay, now let's say a monopolist comes along, and the monopolist is able to set the price artificially high. See where society no longer does that first formula work. Now there's a new place where the demand meets the monopolist price, and society gets that much stuff. And it means they get that much less quantity, and they pay this much extra for it. And that extra amount, which I shade in red here, has a term economists use called the monopolist rent. Now, economists use the term rent differently than normal people do. You can invest in an apartment building and extract rents. You can invest in a customs official in Paraguay and extract rents. And they use the term that way. And they use it. And a monopolist invests in acquiring a monopoly, and then he extracts rent. He extracts that extra amount that is essentially siphoned away from society. It's siphoned away that extra amount we pay for a small amount of goods. That's the amount of value that gets sucked out of society because we have a monopoly. And that's, incidentally, that's why we don't like monopolies in this country. Well, we have a monopoly. Controls 96% of a certain market. The monopoly happens to be owned and run by the government, but it's a monopoly. It's called the public school system. And there's nothing about the fact that it's owned by the government changes this fundamental dynamic. It's the whole point of having monopoly is to sell an inferior product at a high price and extract the difference. And it doesn't matter whether the monopoly is owned by the government or a church or a private businessman or anybody. That's the basic dynamic of the monopoly. To basically siphon that area that's in red out of society. I'm going to talk about 7 questions about U.S. government spending. I've done a lot of research, and it's funny because there's all kinds of articles and papers and internet sites about we don't spend enough and we need to spend more and how much better it would be if we spent more. It's amazingly hard to find out how much do we actually spend on education. There's whole sites devoted to it, saying we don't spend enough and teachers need more time. But actually getting to the fiscal data, what are we spending, is really amazing. It takes more research than I would have expected. I'm going to answer 7 questions. One question is, how much do government, state, local spend altogether, and how big is the U.S. state fiscal crisis? Let's just start with the big picture. Then, how big is the crisis versus the budgets? How much does the U.S. spend on K through 12 education? How many students go through K to 12 schools? Therefore, how much does the U.S. spend per student? And lastly, what is the U.S. spending versus the OECD, the list of 30 countries which are our competitors? Incidentally, I'll tell you the punchline of one of these jokes up front is that we rank 25th now out of 30 OECD countries. We're 25th. And by the time you test 15 and 16-year-olds, we're 25th on that list of 30 countries. So, how much does state and local government spend? I hope everybody knows the Statistical Abstract of the USA. It's your handbook to being a citizen. It's a great document. It's a great thing that gets published each year. Total state and local expenditures in 2007 were $1.9 trillion. So I'm just going to write $1.9 trillion in there. How big is the U.S. state fiscal crisis? It dominates the headlines. We all know it's gripping us. It's state fiscal crisis. If we look at this document from April 2009, National Conference of, and the reason I put in all my sources is because if I don't, I've had so many people challenge and say, well, this can't possibly be. So if you want to take some notes, these are exactly where you can find these numbers. They estimated last April, when they put it, they were describing the budget gaps for the 2009 year, the highest estimate, $62 billion. So I'm calling that $60 billion. $60 billion is the total, if you aggregate all the state fiscal crisis. Incidentally, Oklahoma, as you probably know, is looking at a $530 million state deficit. And that's just because you made some changes that was going to be $700 million. How big is the crisis versus the budget? Well, that's just $60 billion divided by 1.9 trillion. That's 3.1%. Now, why that might be interesting is I've never known a business person who hasn't had to go through their company and tighten their belt 3%. I've gone through and started looking for 5%, and I found 20%. And every business person I know has had to do that at one point or another. This entire state fiscal crisis, aggregated across the U.S., is over 3%. It concerns 3%. If state governments could tighten the budget 3%, everything you're reading about disappears. Kind of a moderately interesting fact. How much does the U.S. spend on education? Here's something. It's education. This is from a site that tracks all this, pulls it together. Education. Primary through secondary is $550 billion. But there's this other kind of funny line, education not definable by level. That's $100 billion. Now, as Mr. Price mentioned, I used to work for Mr. Buffett. I ran a couple of his companies, and he taught me he doesn't like income statements with a line "other" on it. But if you have a line that's other and it's under, say, 1%, it's okay. I don't know what he would say to an other line of $100 billion. Education not definable by level. They're spending $100 billion and they can't define it. There's another, so that comes to about 650 billion. If you add those two together, 5 billion, 100 billion. But if you go to the U.S. Department of Education publishes this each year. It's a document called the Condition of Education, and you have to get, there's a lot of fluffy stuff up top, but you dig into it. And there's a lot of data, but it's deep in the tables. Here's figure 33.1, and on 2005, 2006. We were spending, that marks 250 billion if you can't read it. And the states were spending just over 250, the local was spending just under 250, the federal government was tossing in 50 billion. You add that and 250 plus 250 plus 50 is 550 billion. But that was 4 years ago. And this is averaging about a 5 or 6% increase a year. I just used, to be a little bit conservative, 4% a year for 4 more years. You do the arithmetic there. $650 billion, which matches the other number I just gave you. $650 billion seems to be about what we're spending a year. So I'll write that number in there. I promise there's only 3 more of these numbers to go. How many students go to K through 12 schools? Again, we go here, back to figure 4.1. Here's the 50 million mark. Here's pre-K through 8. Here is 9 through 12. The total is this line. And you can see that it crosses the 50 million student mark right about where we are now, 2009, 2010. So there are roughly 50 million students in the U.S. I think it's 200,000 over. So how much do we spend per student? Again, this is where the numbers get big, but that is just 650 billion divided by 50 million, which equals $13,000 per student. It's the total expenditures for every student in American public schools. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. Do you think we're getting $13,000 worth of results? What's that? How's that compare incidentally to the OECD? I just got to the number a different way. It was 11,300 back 4 years ago, and again, you do the math, and you end up with, no matter how you approach these numbers, like I said, the totals are difficult to find, but the data points are there, and you can string them together, and no matter sort of where you go, you end up with the same place, $13,000 per student. That is, incidentally, 38% higher than the OECD average. We're spending 38% more than the average industrial country. It's $13,000 per student, and we're at the bottom of the heap, or at the 25th. And why this issue is important to me is that I like to say this country, we forget that every industrial competitor we had was destroyed by World War II, with the exception of Sweden. Every industrial country was ruined. And we in Sweden ran the tables on the globe for 50 years. And I think what happened is somewhere along the way, we just started saying, this is the natural order of things. We're number one, God's in his heaven, no one can touch us. Well, somewhere in the last 15, 20 years, people have been catching us at the fringes, and now they're coming, in business they would say we got fat, dumb, and happy. We just got very complacent. And now we all understand this sort of global competition we're under. So, 4 arithmetic problems. And again, I'm sure this math isn't beyond anybody. I know it's kind of odd at a lunch to throw a whole bunch of numbers at people, but we got to $13,000 per child. How many children are in the average classroom? Well, according to the NEA itself, that number is 24.6, or in the average American classroom. Okay, that's interesting. 24.6 children. So expenditures per classroom, $13,000 total expenditures per child, 24.6 children per classroom. We're spending $319,800, call it $320,000 per classroom. Again, interesting fact. Let's go, so we have $320,000 that we are spending per classroom. How much do a teacher in a classroom actually cost? And by the way, the thrust of this is not to criticize teachers or that to say they're overpaid. I think they're underpaid. I want them to get a lot more. That's just the opposite of the thrust of my talk here. Teachers, according to the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they publish this for every profession, teachers make, and again, you can take the notes on these tables and find them yourself, Teachers make a mean of $47,000, a median of $45,000 per year. So to be conservative, I use the high number. Let's just say that they all make the $47,000. $47,000, there's a benefit load, according to the NEA itself. By the way, I'm sort of public enemy number one to the NEA. They have whole things devoted to don't listen to this guy coming here. Which, as far as I'm concerned, they can carve on my tombstone that the NEA was. A benefit load of 27% gives you total compensation costs of a teacher on average in the U.S. of $59,900, call it $60,000. Average classroom is 800 square feet, but I used 1,000 square feet, again, to be generous. And those of us who are in business and have had to rent space and pay CAM know that for $20, maybe not in a building like this, but for $20 you can rent decent space and pay CAM, pay heating, lighting, cleaning, have a common area, have janitorial service. So $20 you can do just fine getting space. So if the average classroom is 1,000 square feet and $20 for CAM, that's $20,000. Now I'm getting to the punchline. If you stick through just to get a little bit more arithmetic, if we're paying $60,000 in total compensation cost to teachers, and it's cost really $20,000 to have a nice space, including common area that supports it, and do all the heating and electricity and light and services, that's a $60,000 plus $20,000 is $80,000 in direct costs. Now, that's your grade. I'm sure a lot of you will see the obvious question. If we're putting $320,000 into the system for every classroom, and it looks like it costs $80,000 generously, conservatively, to what it actually costs to put a teacher in front of a classroom and pay for the classroom and support it and everything, where's the other 320 minus 80, $240,000 going? Well, here's my guess. Remember this? Monopolist rent. What's happening isn't anything that you should expect not to happen in the case of the monopoly, that you should expect not to happen. So I'm going to suggest a better idea and then turn to Oklahoma itself. Better idea, let children withdraw from government schools. And Milton was always very keen to, he didn't like the word term public school because, Hardee's is privately owned, but it's open to the public. The Burger King, it's a government school. The defining characteristic is that it's owned and managed by the government. So let children withdraw from government schools, save the $13,000, give them each a scholarship for $6,000. Net savings, instead of spending $13,000, they withdraw, you give them $6,000, you save $7,000. Now at this point, the opposition says, well, you don't really save any money. When a child withdraws from the school, you don't save any money. To which I have two answers. One answer is, gee, that's not when they say when you add a child to the school, they say it costs more and we need that $13,000, but you withdraw a child out, it doesn't save you any money. Well, you can't have that both ways. And those of you who've ever worked with a balance sheet and income statement understand, both of those can't be true. The other answer comes from Mr. Buffett, not regarding this, but Mr. Buffett had another point to me, because I was talking about fixed costs one time, the fixed cost of this or that business, and he said, Patrick, there's no such thing as a fixed cost. There's a spectrum. And there's some costs that take you 2 or 3 years to cut, and there's some costs that take you 2 or 3 minutes to cut. And everything else falls on that spectrum. There's no such thing as a fixed cost. So all this stuff about fixed costs, I don't know. But the truth is, by the way, the capital costs, the fixed plant is about, of that 13,000 in the U.S., it's about 1,000. It's about 8%. So even if the worst, their argument could only be true up to that $1,000, and make your own. In which case, you'd only be saving $6,000 per student. But if you accept what I said about fixed costs, you really would save the whole $7,000. So what's the fiscal effect of that? Assume 20% of children in the U.S. took this deal. Well, there are 50 million kids, as we saw, in U.S. schools. 20% of 50 million is 10 million. You save $7,000 on each. 10 million students that you would save $7,000 on each, $70 billion in savings. 20% taking that deal. And I would expect if I asked for a show of hands, if you had children, if you could educate them in government schools or get a voucher for $6,000 and apply towards a private school, I bet at least 20% of people would take that deal. Why does that number look familiar? Well, the entire state budget crisis is $62 billion. So we could save $70 billion if we started offering vouchers in this country and 20% of students took them. In California, they're letting prisoners out of prison rather than let children have the option to leave school with a voucher for half of what it's costing the government to educate them. It reminds me of those of us who are old enough to remember the Cold War and the history of the Soviet Union. They collectivized agriculture after the October Revolution. A couple of years later, they collectivized agriculture, and then they proceeded to have 75 years of bad weather. Because they had terrible results, and they kept going, it's the bad weather. Right? It's just another bad harvest, another bad. Well, and you just kind of have to laugh. Like, didn't it occur to somebody that, here we are, we're letting prisoners out of prison rather than give children a chance to have a voucher for half the cost that it otherwise costs to educate them and go find their own school. By the way, if 30% took the deal, the math works out to $105 billion. So, the fiscal effect for Oklahoma, you have 600,000 students in your schools. You're spending $6.1 billion, and it comes to $10,200. The OCPA, as I said, just published something. It was $10,250. I had $10,300, so it's a good number. There are 600,000 students in the schools. If 20% take that deal, that'd be 120,000 kids. If you offered them a voucher, let's say for just $5,000 out of the $10,000 that you're currently spending. So you save $5,000 on each. 120,000 kids, you save $5,000 each. There's $600 million in savings. You could eliminate your entire state budget crisis if you offered a voucher for $5,000 and 20% of the children take it. The whole problem goes away. Current Oklahoma deficit, there's the 530. So I'm not sure which is crazier. The Soviet agricultural model and the inability to say, let's think outside the box a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't organize things top down and so forth, like the Soviet agriculture system was organized, or as we're doing it with education. I don't really. Today's most important number, and I hope those of you who have a pen and paper could even write this number down. It's the most important number you're going to get today. It is. That's your governor's memo. And out of respect for the governor, I didn't put his cell phone number in there. That's the governor's office number, and I want you to call it. Because what's going on in Oklahoma is there's something very close to what I just described. Now, for certain technical reasons and something called a Blaine Amendment, the choice movement sees a progression. The first step is what's called backpack funding, like they do in Oakland, California. Children go to any public school they want, they have a choice, and the money goes in their backpack with them, so to speak. That's a baby step. Next step is charter schools. We in the choice movement love charter schools. It's a great step forward. People get more choice. The dynamics of choice and markets and innovation and competition start working. But it itself is sort of a third of a loaf. The next two steps are tuition tax credits and vouchers. Vouchers are sort of the most aggressive. They're the simplest. I love them. But there's a reason. But tuition tax credits and vouchers are almost interchangeable economically. And the Oklahoma has before it, it's going to come to session on Saturday before committee of the Senate, a very fine and well-written tuition tax credit bill. And it looks good that it's going to pass the Senate. And like I say, it's almost the equivalent of vouchers of everything I've been talking about. Just the way the money flows never actually bounces into the state and out like a voucher. It stays in people's pockets and they get a tax credit. You get $1,000, you give $1,000 to a scholarship granting organization, you knock $1,000 over the tax bill, so it ends up not costing you anything. And then what happens is private schools, and I visited a wonderful one, St. John's Missionary Baptist Church and School today, and I'd love to talk about the work that I see them doing, that I see happening in other cities across America, that but they would set up an SGO, Scholarship Granting Organization, sort of as part of their school, and you could just give money to it and knock that same amount of money off your tax bill. So it's effectively, and then they give the scholarships directly. It's just like vouchers. You're taking money out of the system and putting it in the hands of students who then make, and parents who make their own decisions. It's going to get through, it sounds like, it's going to get through the Senate and the House, both committees, and be voted on. But there is a high suspicion that your governor is going to veto it. And all respect for the governor, not here to badmouth anyone, but from what I've read and heard, the governor, like many people, is one of these folks who thinks in terms of the system. So they want to talk about the system, how to improve the system, and what the system needs more of, and what it leads less of. So which my answer is, stop worrying about the system. Start worrying about the children. And the whole goal of trying to fix this by reforming the system is as hopeless as the Soviet apparatchiks who said, well, how are we going to change our system next year so we don't have bad weather? It doesn't work. Until you get competition, I'll end this and take questions, but until you get competition, let me give you one last Milton story. He used to say, this society gives food stamps, and we think that food stamps are great. It's good that low-income people have food stamps. But suppose somebody said, you have to take your food stamp, Mr. Simpson. If you have to take you have to take your food stamp and you have to spend it at a government-run grocery store. Well, presumably, a lot of us would say, well, what special advantage does the government have in running a grocery store? Let them use the voucher. Food stamp's just a voucher. Well, right now we have a system where essentially Oklahoma is giving each of its students a $10,300 voucher, but saying you have to spend that at a government-run education store. Doesn't make any more sense. Our higher education is a voucher system. Universities are a voucher system. The vouchers are called GI Bills and Pell Grants. That's a voucher. And it's made our university system the envy of the world. It's starting to decay, probably because it's becoming so remedial for the underperformance of K through 12. But our higher education is a voucher system. Uniquely, we have a K through 12 system where there is no choice. You get assigned to schools based on your zip code. And I think that the fact that we are now 25th out of 30 industrial countries and slipping is the necessary outcome of such a poorly designed system. So thank you for your time. I'd like to take any questions.
I will. Let's go ahead.
Patrick, you see the power in your numbers, but you've got one bump in the road, you know it, you mentioned it, the NEA. They're a powerful voting bloc, they each have a vote, whether it's in small community, states, or across the nation. How do you deal with the NEA?
Great question. The question is about the NEA. The truth is I probably shouldn't pick on the NEA or just the NEA. There's what I call the guild. Sometimes I call it the educrats. There's a guild that's just doing what guilds always do, what monopolies always do. Part of it is the teachers union, but just part of it. There's the guild includes just the whole, behind the high school, behind your local high school, there's whole layers that folks like you and I normally never see. It's the district headquarters and its staff, the county, the state, and the federal. And that set of layers plus the teachers union comprise the guild. And yes, this is a bitter, bitter political fight. And anytime you go and try to fight this fight, they trot out the teachers. And of course, there's teachers living in every neighborhood in America. They trot out the teachers. And from your local neighbors say, oh, these guys hate your teachers. I don't hate the teachers. I love the teachers. I think it's a shame that they're only making $60,000 with benefits. I wish they were making, it's not that $80,000 I worry about. It's the $240,000. But all the people involved in that don't want to defend themselves. So they trot out the teachers and try to make this a fight between us and the teachers. So it's a tough fight because they have a built-in grassroots organization. Every block, town block in America practically has a school teacher on it. So, and they don't really understand their interests. They don't understand. Well, it seems to me that the good ones do and the weak ones don't. If you switch to a choice system, what would happen is just like if you had some government-run restaurants and you switch to people, and that's where only the place people could eat, then you switch to choice. if you let people choose, the better restaurants would succeed and make more, and the bad restaurants would. Same thing goes with the schools and the teachers. I think that good teachers could, under this kind of, the whole dream is really to get enough choice that you have 1,000 flowers bloom, and people might set up, little schools in their living room that they take 10 kids and charge $5,000 or $6,000 with a voucher. And some of them maybe would take over. So you'd have just a great deal of experimentation. Milton used to also say that it's the only industry in America that operates pretty much as it did 140 years ago. An adult in front of the kids, lecturing them taking notes. There's a little bit of innovation now because of charter schools and technology, but it basically operates with no innovation. If you broke that up and let 100 flowers bloom or 1,000 flowers bloom, you would have all kinds of, you have a fecund environment where the good ideas could work. Well, of course, the monopoly's against that. They're going to fight that tooth and nail. They don't want anyone to have that option. So as you may have guessed already, I'm the least political guy in the world. I'm not politic. I speak my mind. So I try to stay away from the politics themselves. It's been a funny fight. It makes strange bedfellows, like politics always does, but unusually strange in this case. There's 67% of African American families with a child of school-age years support vouchers. 70% of Hispanic families with a child of school-age years support families. In some places, the others support some conservative Republicans and moderate Republicans. Part of the problem is Americans all understand that our schools are failing, but 75% of people think that their school is better than average, which is, of course, not everyone in the room can be taller than average. 79. So people have, and it's natural to have this great affection for your local high school, and you play football, and you have the mother's drive and PTA and stuff. So they feel this loyalty, which makes them, and the PTA and the union tells them this is an assault on your school. So there's actually been a fair bit of opposition from the Republican side, some parts of the country against this. That's maybe 10 years ago. Over the last 10 years, the side the people to get on this fight have been typically the more conservative Republicans and black ministers, African American, who are just tired. The other, I'm sorry to keep dropping Milton's name, but it is, of course, the school choice. Milton used to say that the Democrats hold themselves out as the champions of the poor. And yet on the one issue that would matter more than anything else to improving a lot of the poor, they're on the wrong side. And that's with the exception, though, of much of the African American and Hispanic community. I see somebody standing up there, so I suppose that's...
I'm a former member of the Oklahoma City Board of Education, and I agree with almost everything you've said today. I'm wondering if the $20,000 in overhead costs include such things as the 90% of our students are on a free lunch program and the other equipment that's given to the students in the classroom, such as each student has a computer and the cost of textbooks and this sort of thing. And also, the second question, what do you think of KIPP academies?
Okay, two fair questions. No, that $80,000 does not include the cost of school supplies or textbooks and so forth. That's the other $240,000. Well, it sounds a little out of whack to me. I mean, it's buried in that $240,000. So is the superintendent's salary and the superintendent's secretary and the county and the state superintendent and all the staff that goes in. South Carolina, there's 400 people in the Department of Education. 100 of them have gas cards and SUVs, unlimited gas cards. They're essentially political operatives. In Washington, D.C., there was a guy named Marion Barry, if you remember the... don't have to explain Marion Barry. Marion Barry got in trouble because he put 300 of his closest friends in the Department of Education in D.C. Departments of Education have become what Town Hall was 40 or 50 years ago. It's where pork is and patronage. Basically, Town Hall got cleaned out in the 60s and 70s because of newspapers and DOJ prosecutions and such. That shifted into the departments of education. There's a whole lot that goes on in the departments of education that has nothing to do with education. So, but yeah, and I'm not saying that $240,000 should go away. I'm sure there's a reasonable amount of that should buy computers for kids and pencils and textbooks. I don't think you can account for the $240 that way. On KIPP, I love KIPP. It's a charter school. It's a chain of charter schools. What I love about them is they don't compromise. They don't expand. They won't open a school unless they have the right principal to run it, and that's their whole mantra. And so, but where they have gone in, it seems they've been very successful to me. And it's kind of funny. We support charter schools, but charter schools typically lay low about choice because I think they understand how controversial it is, and they're trying to slip in maybe without evoking the kind of political fights that real pure choice people evoke. But I'm a big fan of charters, and KIPP in particular seems, pardon me, exceptional.
One last question.
Yes. I am obviously in favor of school choice since I started a charter school here in Oklahoma City and executive director. But I think it would be remiss if I didn't point out a couple things about the numbers.
Please.
I only get about $4,000 per student in a charter school, and I believe Oklahoma City is just over $6,000 per student. So that $10,000, I would hate for everybody to think that every school gets that $10,000. My concern would be that that $240,000, which at textbooks, when you get $54 per textbook, and it costs over $100 for just one textbook, and you have to get it for 6 subjects, you're already in the hole to start with. But my concern would be that $240,000 that going to the voucher system, that would come out of the classrooms, because folks think, well, you've got this other $6,000 out there, and it wouldn't be cut from the top and all the other things that goes into education. That is my concern when we look at voucher numbers.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll give 2 responses, and I in particular want to challenge the second part of what you said. The first part, and can I have a minute, sir?
You most certainly.
Okay. I know that 1 o'clock is sort of... first of all, it isn't that we're saying that... Oh, first of all, on the $4,000 number, yes, charter schools never get as much as the local schools do in their area. So you get $4,000. You say the other schools get $6,000. I would seriously challenge that. See, what happens is if you look at the numbers that the system itself publishes, they give you numbers like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 per student. You can't trust that. You go and look at the fiscal numbers, and it turns out they're just not including a whole bunch. They're just not, it's only $6,700 if we just don't count all these other things that we do in the public school system. So, they're just counting the current. So I see this over and over. States publish numbers like that, but then you dig into the numbers or you talk to sort of the people on the fiscal side of the state, and they internally use numbers. Well, it's $13,000 in the United States. If you look at all the money going in, and you divide it into the public school system, and you divide it by the number of students, it's $13,000 a piece. If you go to each state and say, how much do you spend? They say, $6,000, and this state says 7, and this one says 8, and this one says 6. Not everyone can be below average. All the money going, and that's just because when you look at their analysis, they leave out all kinds of costs. They say, well, the retirement system for teachers, we're not going to include that. Well, you either got to count it when you're accruing it or when you pay it. It's like businesses who don't like to include depreciation. You either got to include the money when you spend it, or when you buy the capital equipment, or you include it when you depreciate it. It's got to be one or the other. So people always challenge these numbers. I've gone right to, I've given you the federal documents where you can go and see these. It is $13,000, but each individual state thinks that they're well below that number. Now, as far as the vouchers, it's not coming out of the $240,000. That's not the idea. And this is a big misperception. People object to vouchers and they say, well, it takes revenue out of the school system. What they also forget is that it takes costs, and it takes far more cost than it takes revenue. And so the money left per student is higher. So you achieve the students left in the school who don't take the vouchers or the tuition tax credits, they're better off. There's more money per student than there was before. And the students who leave are better off because otherwise, why would they leave? The taxpayer is better off because he's achieved higher per pupil funding with no tax increase. Everybody in the system is better off except for one, the Guild. The Guild is the one that's worse off. So thank you very much.
Patrick, all 3 clubs have made a contribution to their foundations in your name. Thank you very much. Great meeting. I always like to leave Club 29 members with just a thought for the day. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. Loftus is he kind of checks them out. Just a little, something to think about. Light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear bright until you hear them speak. Have a great week.